What's up, 80s Revolution crew members? We are here. We are back for another video. What kind of video tonight? Well, we're either going to do Hasbro Series 5 or Part 2 of the Blu-ray Horror Collection. Which one would you like to do? Which video would you like me to make tonight? Would you like me to focus on Hasbro Series 5? Or would you like me to do Part 2 of the Blu-ray Horror Collection? You decide right now. Let me know. I'll wait. Okay. You have spoken. We are doing Hasbro WWF Wrestling Figure Collection Series 5 Extravaganza review tonight. So, Series 5, 1992, I believe. Let me confirm that quickly, if I can. Series 5 was indeed 1993. About a year before I stopped really watching WWF at all. I remember stopping WWF right after high school, and high school for me ended in 1994. At that point, I switched over to WCW. 1995 was the kickoff of Monday Nitro, and to me, they had much more entertaining action. WWF at the time was unappealing to me, and so it was actually kind of sad because my WWF obsession ended right after high school, ended in 94. I collected the figures still, and I watched wrestling, but it was more WCW and Monday Nitro. So I am not super familiar with what was going on. I mean, I've looked back and I know what happened in WWF in 94, 95, 96, and so on, but I was not a major part of it. I would read about it. I would occasionally catch Raw, but I was more of a WCW and NWO fan. So anyway, 1993 Hasbro Series 5. Great batch of figures, capitalizing on the characters of the WWF at the time. Again, we are jumping more into a sort of character-based cartoon era. Not fully engulfed in it yet, but you know, we've got guys like IRS and Skinner that we'll review tonight, and we'll talk about the origins of those characters and the actual guys who played the characters. And WWF at that time would take people and completely repackage them and completely ignore their history, which I find, I don't know, as a mark, you know, as a fan, I find disrespectful. As a realist and somebody who understands, I find it as another payday for these wrestlers, and they probably couldn't have cared less. But let's talk about Hasbro Series 5. First, we have the fourth or fifth, and final Hulk Hogan figure. Hogan has had a figure in every single line so far, in every single series so far. And this is by far my favorite Hogan figure. This is, for some reason, called Hulkster Slam, I believe. I don't know why it's called that. But it's no shirt Hogan, finally in full-on wrestling gear, and he has sort of that Jake the Snake punch mechanism, and for some reason they're calling him Hulkster Slam. I don't know if that's the official name for him, but according to Wikipedia, this is Hulkster Slam, but this is by far my favorite Hulk Hogan figure. Again, completely in wrestling gear, no shirt, and to me, the absolute best Hulk Hogan figure. Great play pose. Finally, we get a Hulk Hogan figure that's ready for war. And it took all 5 series. But again, this is the final Hulk Hogan figure in the Hasbro line, except for the mail away. Final regular release Hulk Hogan figure, and to me, the best one yet. Hulk Hogan number 5. At the time, 1993, in WWF, there was a wrestler who got his start in a tiny little independent organization called the Continental Wrestling Federation. Then got into some Jerry Lawler Mid-South stuff, then made his way to the NWA, where he was part of the tag team called the Skyscrapers. We're talking about 1989 or so. The Skyscrapers originally was Sid Vicious and this guy named Mean Mark Callis. And of course, Mean Mark Callis went on to become one of, if not the greatest character of all time, The Undertaker. But at the time in the NWA, they were a big man tag team. They were tall, huge guys. And they were the Skyscrapers. And of course, they feuded with the Steiners and the Road Warriors. But one half of that tag team was Sid Vicious. And when Sid Vicious got to the WWF, of course, Vince McMahon changed his name to Sid Justice. And he was, I don't know where the justice part came from. I don't know if he was kind of like an all-American good guy. I know he entered the WWF at first as a good guy. Of course, you can't have a name like Sid Justice and be a bad guy. So Sid came into the WWF as a good guy, Sid Justice, eventually turning bad, of course. And then that's where kind of like the Psycho Sid moniker came. But anyway, this is the Sid Justice figure. It's got that press slam mechanism that Axe and the Ultimate Warrior and Warlord have. Pretty fitting for this guy, for Sid. I don't mind this figure at all. I think it's a good figure. We've got a decent likeness of Sid. Pretty plain outfit, but that's what he was wearing. Blue trunks, black boots. Not bad at all. I have no problem with this figure. I think it's a great figure. So this is, to my knowledge, so Sid had a Galoob figure, which we'll go over in our next series. Sid had a WCW Galoob figure. This is his second ever action figure, and it is under the Sid Justice moniker. Randy Savage has been very well represented in the Hasbro line thus far. And for some reason, after the Macho King gimmick, Savage went really colorful. He had these really colorful outfits, cowboy hat. He just kind of really morphed into this completely different gimmick. Not different character. He was always the same Randy Savage, but just a different costume gimmick type thing. And this is his 4th Hasbro figure. This is Randy Macho Man Savage in his colorful gear that was basically his final run in the WWF. After this, Savage, of course, showed up on WCW, Monday Nitro. Good guy, bad guy, good guy, bad guy, NWO, not NWO. Had a really interesting WCW career, but this is his WWF final Hasbro figure as the, Slim Jim, snap into it Randy Savage. Colorful outfit, cowboy hat, whatever he was going with at the time. It's got that horrible curse of death leg pose, but other than that, not a bad figure. It's almost like you can look past the glued together weird mechanism thing and enjoy this figure. Decent figure. So when we talk about characters, when we talk about reinventions of characters, I guess the final, or not final, but the next 5 figures really capture the reinvention of characters in the WWF. So first up, the least of the reinventions of characters. We talked about Rick Martel when we were doing the LJN series. Rick Martel started his career, well, I don't know if he started his career. He's from Canada. I'm sure he wrestled in Canada way before, but came to the WWF in about 1979 or so. And, got into a tag team with Tony Gurria and became WWF Tag Team Champions, I think a couple of times. And had a decent run before he went to Minnesota and joined the American Wrestling Association, where he quickly became their world's champion before returning to the WWF and teaming with Tito Santana as Strikeforce. First, of course, with Tom Zink as the Can-Am Connection, and then Rick Martel as Strikeforce, winning the WWF Championship and then losing it to Demolition. Before reinventing himself as a heel for the first time in his career, and a pretty believable, cocky, arrogant heel, as Rick the Model Martel. Pretty plain figure, but when he debuted, he was reinvented from Strikeforce Rick Martel to this arrogant model with his good looks and his, I remember he used to wear a sweater tied around his neck, and he had a perfume canister with a pump on it that he called, I think it was called Arrogance. And he would carry this giant perfume, almost like a bug spray machine, almost like a super soaker. And apparently it was filled with Arrogance, the perfume. And he would spray it into his opponent's eyes. And this is really when the WWF started to become unbearable. But anyway, this is Rick the Model Martel. Decent figure. Again, one of my favorite play poses. Plain, but playable. So it's nice to see Rick Martel getting a shot as kind of a bad guy for the first time in his career, representing the model Rick Martel. From here, he would go to the WCW, where he was just Rick Martel and was a jobber before he ended up retiring. So here we have Rick Martel. I wouldn't call him a jobber in WCW. He was kind of a lower mid-card wrestler. Okay. For some reason, I didn't check the time on the camera. We're running out of time. We're going to come back. This is all going to splice together. You won't know the difference. It's okay. See you soon. Seamless, just like I said. All right, continuing on with Series 5. So we're talking about these next 4 figures are, to me, some of the strangest transitions into characters created from the mind of Vinnie Mac, Vince McMahon. So this next guy, he definitely represents the era that I first got involved in WWF wrestling. Fell in love with WWF wrestling. 1985, 9 years old, 80s Revolution, 9 years old. There's a tag team in the WWF called the American Express, or the U.S. Express. And that U.S. Express tag team was made up of Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo. Mike Rotundo was a Florida guy, very plain, sort of, baby face, collegiate wrestler. And he and Barry Windham captured WWF tag team titles and had an epic, a match with Nikolai Volkov and Iron Sheik at WrestleMania 1. And they were certainly one of the, one of the first baby-face tag teams of the big WWF boom of 1985. The U.S. Express, Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo. So Mike Rotundo after after they held tag team titles, dropped it to Greg Valentine and Brutus Beefcake. From there, it was kind of over for the U.S. Express. Barry Windham left the WWF and went to NWA in Florida, got into some stuff with Ric Flair, of course. Mike Rotundo kind of lingered around the WWF for a little while. They actually replaced Barry Windham with Danny Spivey, who looked like Barry Windham at the time, and they put him with Mike Rotundo as the new U.S. Express. Failed miserably, of course. After that, Mike Rotundo returned to Florida, ended up in the NWA as part of the Varsity Club with Kevin Sullivan, and kind of went on from there. But as he returned to the WWF around 1992-93, he was not brought back as Mike Rotundo. He was brought back as Irwin R. Shyster, or IRS. Okay, I guess, we're talking about, cartoony WWF at the time. And again, as a purist, as a mark, IRS is silly. Being a normal human being, IRS made Mike Rotundo some more money. And so anyway, here is the IRS character. This is Mike Rotundo as Irwin R. Shyster, who was a former IRS employee who was waging war against non-tax-paying WWF superstars at the time. I don't know. But here is his Hasbro character. Not a bad figure. Has that, weird sort of, where is it? It doesn't work, I guess. But, foot stomping figure. I can't. Yeah, it's kind of stuck. But you move the arm up and down, and the foot is supposed to go up and down and kick. I don't know what that's called. But IRS, Mike Rotundo teamed with, found most success teaming with Ted DiBiase as Money Inc., and they were WWF Tag Team Champions. Again, this is Mike Rotundo's pretty much final curtain call as a superstar. He returned back to WCW after this and had a whole bunch of different names. Michael Wall Street. At one point, he was part of the NWO as one of the probably most meaningless NWO characters of all time. But it's kind of bittersweet for me because I really loved Mike Rotundo, and he was really one of the first major, when I was watching WWF Wrestling in 84 and 85, the U.S. Express was one of my first tag teams that I experienced and enjoyed watching. So, of course, always holds a special place in the 80s Revolution's heart. Mike Rotundo as Irwin R. Shyster. Again, more strange characters. So, of course, we know who Demolition Smash is. We've talked about him in previous reviews. We talked about him... Well, we didn't talk about him in the LJN review because he didn't get an LJN figure. But Barry Darsow was, of course, Crusher Khrushchev in the NWA. Came to WWF as Demolition Smash. And when that was all over, he was repackaged as the Repo Man. We are talking serious WWF cartoony, silly, gimmicky stuff. Repo Man was a character who would repossess. So he was based on a car repossessor. So they take people who repossess your cars and they make him into a WWF superstar. So this is Barry Darsow, the Repo Man. And in some, look, he's got like the blindfold on. Have you ever seen, has anybody ever repossessed your car and had a blindfold on? But apparently Vince McMahon thought, hey, if you're going to be sneaking around in the middle of the night repossessing cars, you should probably have a Zorro mask on. Yeah, so in his early WWF vignettes, before he was officially introduced, you'd see the Repo Man sneaking around and repossessing stuff. I don't know. I mean, mid-card, lower mid-card at best, gets some early wins on syndicated WWF TV and then fades into nothingness, I suppose. But anyway, this is Barry Darsow, Demolition Smash, or the Repo Man. And what's pretty awesome is they keep that eagle tattoo that Crusher Khrushchev had, that Smash had. In fact, when he was Demolition Smash, he would cover up that tattoo with an arm, an elbow pad, because it was very visible as Crusher Khrushchev. And so he would cover it up as Smash, but it's out there in its full exposure as the Repo Man. So again, 1992, 1993, all character-based, all gimmicky character, bigger than life, really unusual type characters. And Steve Kern, when we talk about the AWA figures in depth, which we will do, we did them earlier on when I was making videos, but I didn't go through each figure. I just kind of summarized the AWA Remco line as a whole. But since these individual figure reviews are doing so well on here and are apparently popular, I will do individual AWA Remco reviews. I could probably do it in 2 videos. But if you remember, Steve Kern got his first wrestling figure as an AWA Remco figure, part of the tag team, the Fabulous Ones, is Steve Kern and Stan Lane. So I guess after the Fabulous Ones, or whatever Steve Kern was doing in Florida, kind of wore itself out, Steve Kern was a wrestler. So after the Fabulous Ones, Steve Kern returned to Florida and wrestled as a character named Steve the Gator Kern. Vince McMahon capitalized on that, brought him to the WWF, and turned him completely into Skinner. Skinner is, of course, from the swamps of Florida. He is a gator wrestler, gator killer, and brought to the WWF as Skinner. In fact, some of the grossest interviews with Skinner are of him with a big giant pouch full of tobacco in his mouth, and he would spit it all over himself and his opponents. Again, a payday for Skinner. Again, national exposure, worldwide exposure. I'm sure Skinner wrestled at WrestleMania. I just don't know that right now. But Steve Kern, Fabulous Ones, Pretty Boy, sort of tag team, think Rock and Roll Express type characters, turned into Skinner. Now, to look at the figure, I mean, the figure's great. This is one of my favorite figures. It's perfect play pose. It's got a thickness that I like the figures to have. I think this is an absolutely perfect figure. The character, of course, is silly. The figure's perfect. To me, it's one of my top 5 figures of all time in the Hasbro line. After Skinner, Steve Kern was the first Doink the Clown. And then after that character went to Matt Bourne. We'll go on about that later. But Steve Kern, I might have had that wrong. Sorry. I think Matt Bourne was the first Skinner. And then after Matt Bourne had some drug issues and some other issues with the WWF, multiple wrestlers filled in as Doink, and Steve Kern was one of them. I messed that whole thing up. It's okay. Doesn't matter. Steve Kern, awesome Hasbro figure. Terrible character as Skinner. Jacques Rougeau was obviously Canada, had a whole thing in Bret Hart's, or Stu Hart's Stampede Wrestling. When he finally got into the WWF, he came with his brother Raymond Rougeau, and they were simply known as the Rougeau brothers. Mid-card babyface tag team decided to get repackaged and have a heel turn where they took on Jimmy Hart as their manager, and they were the heel Rougeau brothers. After that wore off and went away, Vince McMahon decided to repackage Jacques Rougeau as the Canadian Mounty. Oh, yes. So we've got Jacques Rougeau playing a Canadian mounted police officer character. And again, we have a talented guy in Jacques Rougeau, a very talented wrestler put in this gimmick. Had success. Probably the most success he's had in his career. Probably made the most money he ever did in his career as the Mountie. Was a part of some, ongoing WWF storylines, was actually an Intercontinental Champion at one time, and I believe was in a couple of WrestleManias. I think he won the title from Bret Hart and lost it to Roddy Piper at some point. And of course, the best part of the Mountie is his shock stick. I don't know much about Canadian police or politics, but I don't know if Mounties are able to carry guns. Apparently they have a shock stick, which is, kind of like a stun gun. And of course, the Mountie would bring his shock stick to the WWF. And he would use it on wrestlers, on his opponents. And the best worst of wrestle crap was when the Mountie would shock his opponents, and the WWF would pipe in a sort of a shocking sound. So I'm going to do it for you. So he would shock his opponents, and piping through your television was the sound of bzz, bzz, bzz. So that was the Mountie shocking his opponents. So anyway, here is your Mountie figure. Great figure, very nice display figure. Obviously, the play purists would say this is a terrible figure because he's wearing a hat and his full-on Canadian Mountie outfit. But sitting on the shelf, this looks like a pretty good figure. All right, moving on. Our final three. Of course, this wrestler, or I don't know, this guy gets tons and tons of criticism today. He's a beggar of money. He shows up at every single autograph convention, thrusting himself upon autograph seekers. But back in the day, Virgil got his career, I believe. Anyway, he was Soul Man Jones, I think his name was, and I'm sure he had, I don't know where he was wrestling originally, WCCW or Tennessee or Continental or somewhere, but Soul Man Jones wrestled actually one or two matches in the WWF as Mike Jones, and jobbed on TV, and I believe he jobbed on the first or second episode of WWF Wrestling Challenge as Mike Jones. Then the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, came to the WWF and needed a bodyguard, and so Virgil was introduced to the world. And around 1992-93, Virgil became tired of taking orders from Ted DiBiase and stood up for himself and became a good guy, feuding with Ted DiBiase. So here is your one and only Virgil figure. This is after his face turn, and at one point he was indeed the $1 Million champion, and I do believe it was either SummerSlam or WrestleMania where Virgil took on Ted DiBiase for said $1 Million championship belt. But here is your Virgil figure. It's, terrible guy. Well, I don't know if he's a terrible guy, but it's Virgil. Great figure. again, I love this kind of pose. I'm okay with the, sort of Jake the Snake punching mechanism. But I think this is a great play pose, and it's a good figure. It looks like Virgil. Hang on. It looks like Virgil. Fine figure, good play pose, but it's Virgil. Last two figures of the 1993 WWF Hasbro Series 5. Finally, we get a Jim the Anvil Neidhart figure. No, it's not the pink and black Hart Foundation figure. It's the blue, yellow, black and white checkered Jim the Anvil Neidhart high energy figure. What's high energy, you say? Well, high energy was Jim the Anvil Neidhart's tag team with Owen Hart, or Coco Beware. Correct me. I can't remember. Jim the Anvil Neidhart either teamed with Coco Beware or Owen Hart as high energy. Or maybe Owen Hart teamed with Coco Beware as high energy. I think I'm getting this all wrong. This is what happens when you drink like 5 or 6 glasses of wine before doing a video. Anyway, this is your Jim the Anvil Neidhart figure. For some reason, he was wearing this weird outfit. It's really sad because this figure needs to be in pink and black. There's no reason why we don't have a Hasbro WWF Hart Foundation set. Absolutely no reason. Customizers out there, have a ball with this figure. Paint him pink and black. Let's get a Jim the Anvil Neidhart Hasbro Hart Foundation figure. But here is our one and only Jim the Anvil Neidhart Hasbro figure. It's not high energy. Man, did he team with Owen? Yeah, I think he teamed with Owen as the new foundation. Owen teamed with Coco as high energy. And I just think that was just Jim Neidhart's outfit. I don't know. I can't remember. All right, finally, we've talked about the powers of pain when we did WWF LJN. We talked about the Warlord figure. Warlord, of course, started off in Florida again. Came to the NWA, was managed by Baby Doll, which was really strange. Now we're challenging your wrestling knowledge. The Warlord first gained national exposure by coming to the NWA, being brought in by Baby Doll. Weirdest combination ever. But anyway, that didn't last long. The Warlord was just some big, giant, hulking guy from Minnesota, actually discovered by the Road Warriors and brought into wrestling by the Road Warriors, who, of course, he would later feud with. But the Warlord, after the Powers of Pain split up in the WWF, Barbarian went on to do Head Shrinkers, I think. No, Barbarian wasn't part of Head Shrinkers. Maybe he was. I don't know. I really gotta... God, I'm the 80s Revolution. I'm supposed to know this stuff. Anyway, Warlord, Barbarian were no more. Powers of Pain were no more. And the Warlord was brought back to the WWF around 92, 93 and repackaged as this weird kind of... I don't even know what you call him. I don't know what this is. I don't know, Roman Empire, sort of Hercules type, I don't know. The Warlord. The Warlord with half Phantom of the Opera, silver mask, weird, chesty plates, chains connected to, I don't know. So this was the Warlord circa 1993. Mid-card success, beat up some jobbers, maybe even beat up Jimmy Snuka. I don't know. So here's the Warlord, the one and only Hasbro Warlord figure. Has that press slam pose, which fits him perfectly. Don't mind this pose on him. So here we go with the Warlord's second ever action figure. And I think he only had one more through Jakks. But oh, and he's got a Mattel figure coming out. So Warlord has had 4 figures. Here's his second. Hasbro WWF Warlord. So that's that. That is the WWF Hasbro Series 5, full of gimmick, full of repackaged, revitalized, give them another shot at superstardom, give them another paycheck bunch of characters. Rick Martel, Steve Kern, Jim Neidhart, Mike Rotundo, Randy Savage, Jacques Rougeau, all getting repackaged into cartoon land. And what I read on Wikipedia tonight, it is the final WWF Hasbro line that came on blue card. From here, we get into the colored cards, Series 6. We will talk about those next. I'm going to switch up next time and do part 2 of the Blu-ray horror collection. We are up to 232 subscribers. And early subscriber of mine, WWF LJN, or LJN WWF, I'm not sure which one, said, hey man, I can't believe this channel has grown so much. I remember when we had 50 subscribers, and so do I. I remember when this was small and tiny, and to some it is still small and tiny and meaningless, but to me 232 subscribers is mind-blowing. So as always, thank you guys for hanging out with me, enjoying my stuff, watching the videos, leaving comments. Great stuff. You keep me going. I'm having a blast. We'll see you soon with the second or part 2 of the Blu-ray horror collection. Just picked up a few new things the other day, and I got something that starts with B, so I have to kind of go back and tell you what that was before I move on to the second shelf, which I will do soon enough. Okay, thanks guys. See you soon. Take care. Good night.